A simple security camera notification turned my blood cold. Two uninvited figures casually letting themselves into my daughter's apartment with a key she never gave them. The real horror, however, wasn't just the invasion, but the shocking truth it unearthed. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a mundane sound that usually meant a text from my husband or a news alert. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach immediately clenched. It was a motion notification from the security camera I'd installed for my daughter, Chloe. Not just any motion, though. The thumbnail preview showed two figures standing on her doorstep, their backs to the camera. I recognized the floral print on one blouse and the severe, pulled-back bun on the other. My mother-in-law, Margaret, and my sister-in-law, Jessica. Before I could even process my irritation, a second notification popped up. Front door opened. My blood began to boil. I tapped the notification to watch the live feed. The video was crystal clear. Jessica, with a smug little smile, was pulling a key out of the lock. A key. They had a key. Chloe had explicitly told me she hadn't given them one. They then pushed the door open and sauntered inside as if they were returning to their own home after a day of shopping. There was no knock, no call, just an assumption of entry. My husband, Mark, walked into the kitchen just then, humming to himself as he opened the fridge. He pulled out a bottle of water, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I turned my phone screen towards him, my hand shaking slightly with rage. Again, Mark, again. Why are your mother and sister walking into my daughter's place like they own it? The hum died in his throat. He put the water down and gave that weary sigh, the one that was becoming the soundtrack to our marriage whenever his family was involved. He rubbed his temples. Honey, I'm sure it's nothing. They probably just wanted to drop something off for Chloe. Drop something off? I scoffed, my voice rising. You don't need a key to drop something off, Mark. You leave it on the doorstep. This is the third time this month. The first time, they organized her entire kitchen while she was at work because they didn't like her system. She couldn't find her coffee mugs for 2 days. The second time, they brought over a hideous, scratchy armchair that she didn't ask for and rearranged her living room to make it fit. She's a 24-year-old woman, not a child who needs her apartment decorated by her grandmother. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the countertop. They're just trying to help. You know how my mom is. She just wants to feel needed. Feeling needed doesn't give her the right to violate my daughter's privacy. I was practically shouting now. This is her first place on her own. It's her sanctuary, a place where she's supposed to feel safe and independent. Instead, she has to worry about her grandmother and aunts snooping through her things whenever they feel like it. A cold dread washed over me. Where did they even get a key? I pulled out my phone and dialed Chloe, my heart pounding. It went to voicemail. Of course, she was at work, in a meeting probably, unable to defend her own home. I turned back to the live feed on my phone and toggled the audio on. I could hear their voices now, muffled but distinct, from inside Chloe's apartment. Utterly ridiculous to keep the good plates this high up, Margaret was saying. She'll never use them. We should move them down. And look at this, Jessica chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. Is this what she calls art? It looks like a toddler threw paint at a canvas. My hands curled into fists. They were judging her choices, rummaging through her cabinets, in her home, uninvited, while she was at work. Mark, you have to do something. You have to call them right now. Tell them to get out, I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. He finally looked at me, his expression pleading. Look, let me just talk to them later, tonight. It'll just cause a huge fight if I call them now while they're already there. They'll say we're ungrateful. You know how it goes. Ungrateful for what? A home invasion? I stared at him, dumbfounded by his spinelessness. It was always later, always about avoiding a fight, which really just meant letting them do whatever they wanted. I watched the screen as Jessica walked into the frame, holding something up. It was a framed photo from Chloe's desk, a picture of her and her boyfriend, Michael. "Well," Jessica said with a snide laugh that made my skin crawl. "At least we know she's still with that one. I thought he'd have run for the hills by now." That was it. That was the final straw. They weren't just moving things around. They were in her personal space, mocking her life, her relationships. I looked at my husband, who was still standing there, frozen by his own fear of confrontation. I knew in that moment he wasn't going to do a thing. He would wait, and by the time he worked up the nerve to have a gentle chat, the damage would be done, and Chloe would feel even more violated. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. "Fine. You stay here and figure out how you're going to apologize to your daughter later." Mark's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just walked out the door, my mind a whirlwind of fury. It was a 20-minute drive to Chloe's apartment. 20 minutes for my anger to solidify into a cold, hard plan. I pulled up to her building, my tires screeching slightly, and saw my mother-in-law's beige sedan parked in a visitor spot. I didn't bother finding a proper space. I left my car right behind hers, blocking her in completely. As I walked towards the entrance, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Chloe. "Hey, Mom, sorry I missed your call. Was in a meeting. Everything okay?" While I typed a quick reply with trembling fingers. "I need the spare key code for your lockbox now." A second later, the 4-digit code appeared on my screen. I walked up to the small lockbox disguised as a rock near her planter, punched in the numbers, and felt the cold, heavy weight of the spare key drop into my palm. I took a deep breath, walked up to the door, and quietly slipped the key into the lock. They had no idea I was coming. They thought they were safe, hidden away in their little kingdom of judgment. But the queen was about to come home, and she was not happy. I turned the key, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the air in the small apartment went still. The sound of clinking dishes from the kitchen stopped abruptly. I stood in the entryway, my purse clutched in a white-knuckled grip, and waited. A few seconds later, Jessica's head peeked around the corner. Her smug expression evaporated, replaced by a flash of genuine shock, which she quickly tried to mask with annoyance. "What on earth are you doing here?" she asked, as if I were the intruder. Margaret appeared behind her, wiping her hands on a dish towel she'd obviously taken from Chloe's drawer. "We didn't hear you knock," she said, her voice laced with that cloying, false sweetness she used when she felt cornered. "That's funny," I replied, my own voice dangerously calm. "I didn't hear you knock either." I took a slow step forward, my eyes scanning the room. They had indeed moved the ugly armchair to a prominent position, and the lovely print Chloe had bought at a local art fair was now propped against the wall on the floor. "Get out!" Margaret gasped, placing a hand over her heart in a gesture of pure theater. "Well, I never. We were just helping Chloe. This place is a mess, and with her working so hard. I don't care what you thought you were doing." I cut her off, my patience gone. "This is not your home. You were not invited. You let yourselves in and you went through her things. I want you out of here in the next 30 seconds. I pointed to the small console table by the door, "and you can leave the key right there." Jessica scoffed, crossing her arms. "Chloe gave us the key for emergencies. She wants us to be able to check on things." It was such a blatant lie, so effortlessly delivered, that it stole my breath for a second. "Chloe told me herself that she never gave you a key. I just got off the phone with her. So you can either tell me how you got it, or I can call the police and let them ask you. Your choice." The threat hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Margaret's face went pale. Jessica's eyes darted towards her mother, a silent, frantic conversation passing between them. They knew they were caught. "Mark?" Margaret finally mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. "Mark gave it to us. He was worried about Chloe being all alone here, and he wanted us to have a copy in case something happened. Mark, my husband. He hadn't just avoided the conflict, he had enabled it. He had lied to my face with his silence and his sighs. The rage that had been simmering inside me erupted into a full-blown inferno. But before I could unleash it on them, my gaze drifted past them, towards Chloe's bedroom door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar. I had a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. Chloe was meticulous about closing her bedroom door. It was her private space, her inner sanctum. "You went in her room," I stated, the words leaving my mouth like ice chips. "Now, don't be ridiculous," Jessica began, stepping forward as if to block my path. "We were just tidying up a bit." I didn't even bother to respond. I pushed past her, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sight that greeted me made me feel dizzy. Her dresser drawers were pulled open, clothes spilling out. Her closet was open, shoes kicked aside. They hadn't been tidying, they had been searching. My eyes frantically scanned the room, looking for what they might have been after, and then they landed on her nightstand. Sitting there, open and starkly empty, was a small blue velvet box. My blood ran cold. I knew that box. It had held my mother's engagement ring, a delicate sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. I had given it to Chloe on her 21st birthday, the most precious thing I had to give her, a piece of her grandmother she'd never met. I spun around, my voice a strangled whisper. "Where is it? Where's my mother's ring?" Jessica looked genuinely panicked now. We were just looking at it. It's far too valuable to be left out like this, in this building. Anyone could just walk in." "Like you did?" I snarled. "Where is the ring, Jessica?" Margaret wrung her hands, her face a mask of feigned concern. "We were just worried, dear. We knew you'd want it to be safe. It shouldn't be here." A terrifying calm settled over me. I looked from one of their guilty faces to the other, the pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know existed starting to click into place. Their snooping wasn't random. Their presence here wasn't just about control. They were looking for something specific. "You didn't just find it," I said, the realization dawning on me with horrifying clarity. "You came here specifically to get it." "Why?" Jessica stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. But Margaret, my mother-in-law, straightened her spine, a flicker of her usual self-righteousness returning to her eyes. "Because it's a family heirloom," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "And Michael is planning to propose." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Michael is planning to propose." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration, a claim. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My daughter's beautiful, private, wonderful secret, a moment she was supposed to share with me, had been stolen and twisted into a weapon by these two intruders. "How? How could you possibly know that?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "Mark told us," Margaret said, puffing out her chest as if she'd won some great victory. "Michael came to him, man to ask for his blessing, the proper way, and Mark happened to mention that Chloe had the ring. We both agreed it simply wouldn't do for Michael to propose with a ring from your side of the family. He needs to use his great-grandmother's ring. It's tradition." The betrayal was staggering, a 1-2 punch that left me reeling. Mark hadn't just given them the key, he had given them the reason. He had shared our daughter's most intimate news he hadn't even shared with me, his wife, Chloe's mother. He'd fed her to the wolves. "You have 10 seconds to put my mother's ring back in its box on that nightstand," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. I pulled out my phone and held it up. "If it's not there when I count to 10, the next call I make will be to the police, and I will tell them you broke in and stole a family heirloom worth thousands of dollars. I will press charges. I will testify in court. I will see you in jail before I let you walk out of this apartment with that ring." 1. Jessica's eyes widened in terror. She looked at her mother, who for the first time seemed to understand that I was not bluffing. 2. 3. "Don't be absurd," Margaret stammered, but her conviction was gone. 4. 5. 6. "Give her the ring, Mom," Jessica hissed, her voice cracking. "She means it." 7. 8. With a trembling hand, Margaret reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out the sapphire ring. It glinted under the light, looking small and violated in her grasp. She practically threw it onto the nightstand, where it landed with a soft clink next to its empty box. "Now," I said, my eyes never leaving theirs, "the key." Jessica fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking, and produced the key Mark had given them. She slapped it onto the console table by the door. "Get out," I repeated, "and if I ever find either of you in this apartment again or on this property, you won't get a warning." They scurried out like frightened mice, not making a sound. The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence they left was profound. I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. I carefully picked up the ring, its familiar weight a small comfort, and placed it back in its velvet box, closing the lid. Then I began to put Chloe's room back together. I folded the clothes they had tossed aside, tucked her shoes back into the closet, and straightened the picture of her and Michael on her desk. I tidied her sanctuary, trying to erase the stain of their presence. When I was done, I walked out and saw my car still blocking Margaret's sedan. Good. Let them panic. Let them feel a fraction of the violation they had inflicted. I sat down on Chloe's sofa and finally called Mark. He answered on the first ring. "Honey, is everything okay? Mom called. She sounded really upset." "I'm at Chloe's apartment," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "The one you gave your mother a key to." Silence. "I found them going through her bedroom, Mark. They were looking for my mother's ring. Because you told them Michael was going to propose. You told them before you told me." I was going to tell you," he stammered. You know how Mom gets. I thought it would be easier." "Easier for who, Mark?" I asked, and the dam finally broke. Tears of rage and betrayal streamed down my face. "Easier for you? To avoid a single uncomfortable conversation, you betrayed our daughter's privacy, you broke my trust, and you stood by while your family tried to steal a piece of my history, a piece of her grandmother from her. You made a choice. You chose them. Over us." I could hear him trying to speak, to apologize, to explain, but I wasn't listening. "I am changing the locks on Chloe's apartment tomorrow morning. You will pay for it. I am also calling a locksmith for our house. Your mother and sister are no longer welcome here. And you, Mark, you are not welcome here either until you figure out who your family is. Go stay with your mother. See how easy that is." I hung up before he could respond. Then I texted Chloe. "Everything is fine. Just wanted to see the place again. Left a little surprise for you on the kitchen counter. Love you." I wrote a short note and placed it next to a bottle of her favorite wine that I'd picked up on the way over. The note said, "Your home is safe now, and whatever happens next, remember that you are strong, you are loved, and you deserve a happiness that belongs only to you. I am so proud of you. Love, Mom." Walking out of the apartment, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead with Mark was uncertain, filled with anger and deep, painful wounds that needed to be addressed. But in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I had protected my daughter. I had drawn a line in the sand so deep and so clear that no one would ever dare cross it again. I got in my car, backed out from behind my mother-in-law's sedan, and drove away, not looking back. I was heading home, to a house that was, for the first time in a long time, truly mine,